What's up, everybody? Nigel Marcellus here, and welcome to the third installment of the CONVO or the Conversation series. Here we have Dr. Walter Malone. He's a counseling psychologist, and I really wanted just to bring you on here, one, because I think this is a great platform just to really dig deep and have genuine conversation.
Yeah.
But I think just based on conversations we've already have, and I think this is a lot of substance that can come out with this.
Yeah.
And in that last video, I think a lot of things that I really wanted to talk about is really unpacking myself and unpacking a lot of kind of how I navigate the world, but a lot of that is like the narratives in which I tell myself. Because I think a lot of the internalized narratives, I haven't done or I'm working on really like disrupting them. But I know a lot of conversations we have, we talk about a lot of this, so I just want to let the cameras roll, us have a conversation. So what were your thoughts of that last video when you watched it?
I think you just said it. You highlighted like parts of your narrative, like how you became, how you're still becoming, things that you're still working through and on, and just being really vulnerable and authentic and like really displaying your truth, which I know we were kind of talking earlier, and I was like, man, that seems like, that just seems so organic, in that space. So I really enjoyed watching those clips. And I also, really appreciated how vulnerable you were on with some of the things that you all talked about. So,
thank you. No, I appreciate that. The one thing that I definitely want to talk about today, for sure, is kind of some of the processes of how people can really like dig deep into those narratives of themselves. Because I think sometimes, like, I know for myself, I don't necessarily see my narrative, or I don't really pay attention to it. So I usually like place that responsibility on other things. And it's really not until I talk to somebody who's trained or somebody like a friend who can like hold me accountable that I'm not able to really like take that responsibility, because I always put it in something else. So like, in your opinion, like what are some of the things, or what are steps that can help people really be able to disrupt that?
Yeah, I think most individuals, I'll speak for myself, we're not always truly aware of where we're at, right? What we're doing. Frequently, you probably heard me talk about this before, but like how we practice is how we play, right? And so we're always practicing a behavior, practicing a habit, practicing a narrative, but sometimes we're not in tune to what those pieces are, and really giving time and space to being reflective in our lives. And I think the more that we are able to step back, reflect on like the different things that's happening in our lives, the different behaviors that we are displaying, our values, which is so critical to who we are in our narratives, and as you talked about last time, those internalizations that we have, right? I think that we are a product of both those limitations that we have, and also those things that we see ourselves as having strengths in or success in. But oftentimes we're not tying those things together to complete the whole. And so I think that it's important to step back and be reflective, not only on our limitations, because I think we focus a lot on some of those negative aspects of self, but also giving space to like, our success, our growth, our strengths.
I think, like, how do you do that, though? Because I know for me, something I struggle with is, like, the overthinking element. Sometimes I can't tell, like, is this really, like, anxiety? Is this my intuition? Am I overthinking this, or am I really thinking clearly? Because sometimes, especially when you're, like, in situations that you really want to happen, or when you're thinking about yourself, your accomplishments, your values, and all these things, that so much of our life experiences, or my life experiences, almost like contradict some of those things. So like I might feel like I'm really good at something, and then I'll have an experience that's like, oh no, you're not good enough. You didn't make it past that. So like, how do you kind of get past the overthinking element to be able to really see yourself for who you are?
Well, that's the displacement, right? It's like minimizing some of the things that we are accomplishing, right? And so we can have made progress in certain areas in our life, but that progress doesn't necessarily mean that we've made it to where we ultimately want to be, right? I think we're always in the process of becoming, right? And so we're becoming aspects of ourselves, and because we work to be flexible and adaptable to different situations, there may be seasons of who we are, how we show up. There may be things that we want to accomplish in life. There may be things that we do accomplish, and then we look forward to accomplishing that next goal. So I think it's just being mindful. If we're noticing that we're always looking through a lens or a filter of a deficit, then that's what we're always going to be perceiving. If we're solely only interested in our limitations, then how do we create space for our successes? How do we even recognize our successes? I think that's where we get trapped in, because we don't give enough space to congratulate ourselves. We don't give enough space to just be grateful and cherish certain moments, because we're always looking for or looking through a lens of limitation. Then we don't have the relationship. We don't have the experience. So now all the things that we're thinking about in terms of self is our limitations. And that can be very exhausting. Like even talking about it right now, like that's just, it feels exhausting, right? Like
it does. I think like and I absolutely like receive everything you're saying. I think the thing that like really popped in my mind and was hard is like, especially when you're Black in America, Black man, Black woman, whatever, it's this almost like expectation to produce and to be productive.
Yeah,
and
but
it seems like
whose expectation?
Society in some ways, family, ourselves. I think like a lot of times where we have this expectation to produce and to be productive and to shine and to do all these things to provide, that sometimes that it gets overwhelming, because it's like you want to slow down, you want to take that time.
That's it.
But I got work, or I got schoolwork, and man, I got grades, or I got to provide for my family. I got to eat, I got to sleep, I got to do all these things. So because there's so much of this need to like produce, that is so hard for like anybody to like to rest, to relax, because it's like, oh man, if I'm asleep right now or I'm resting right now, that means I'm not doing all this work or all these assignments or all, there's something I'm missing. So I think like a lot of, for myself too, like I definitely struggle with trying to balance that. How do I be able to like really see myself and appreciate myself, but understanding that too, like I also got things that I have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. But if we don't also include that what you have to do is take care of yourself, then we'll always be living from that perspective, right? And so I think while we may have responsibilities, right, that we have to attend to, we also have to see ourselves as a responsibility. If you think about a basketball court, it has out of bounds lines, right?
Yeah.
Right? And so if those lines was never there, right, if it was just endless, then we'll continue to go and go and go. And what are the limitations? And until we create what those limitations are, right, to what extent do I drive myself? To what extent, right? We have to be able to make the boundaries. Like when you were talking, it sounds like this idea of perfectionism. Well, that don't exist. Right? We can't be perfect. But if we assume and have the expectations of perfection, then we're always burning ourselves out. We're always exhausted. And how healthy is that?
Yeah.
So I think it differs from person to person, but I think we have to, it has to be part of our daily routine. And if we don't make it, just like we make college and in classes and socializing, just like we make that a part of our daily regimen, if we don't make that part of our daily regimen, then we're always minimizing it and putting it outside that boundary line.
So how can we get to a place of recognizing what we're minimizing? Because I think sometimes what we minimize is so normalized that we don't even recognize. Like I know for myself, again, going back to that last video, it's one thing for me to be able to like communicate. Like, yeah, I think there's a lot of times where I don't feel worthy and I don't feel enough, or I don't feel like I'm good enough, and I have to do all these things in order to like prove myself. Yeah. But it's in the act of doing those things, in the moment, the action, I don't recognize it until somebody stops me. Yeah. So like, what are things that we can do to be able to like recognize how much we're minimizing? Because I feel like even now I'm minimizing so much that I don't even recognize. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, how do we even get to that mindset to take that lens off to see all of that?
I think you're doing it right now, right? Like we're talking about that there may be some areas. Well, where do you want to? It's different for different people, right? Like whatever that thing is, but who do you surround yourself around? What are people who you trust and care about? saying to you, and how much do you know that that's true about what your experiences are? Right? I mean, right now we're talking in general terms, but if we're more specific, whereas we just need to make time for ourselves, we need to allow ourselves to say, you know what, I need to rest, and create some space around that. If we need to allow ourselves to say, you know what, I just did well on this on this project or this exam, I'm going to recognize that. You know, however we want to reward that behavior, we have to give space to it, because if we're just tearing ourselves down and never giving ourselves reward or compliments or gratifying ourselves, now we're expecting that the world is going to continue to treat us like that while we're treating ourselves like that, and that's what we begin to internalize.
Yeah.
Right. That we're not worth gratitude. We're not worth healing. We're not worth having time to just rest. That we always have to be in this constant go because society says so. So if society is setting the rules in your life, right? If we're listening to everything else outside of ourselves, then how do you truly get to hear and get to heal and get to listen to that internal voice saying, like, you know, hey, you need to step back. Hey, you need to allow yourself some space to congratulate you. Hey, you need to appreciate yourself. Right? And the fact that maybe there's a lifestyle of never doing that, of course, in the beginning, it's going to be hard. You haven't practiced it. But even hearing and saying what you're saying right now, it's like, okay, I need to set up something daily where I'm recognizing my value, my sense of worth. And as men, man, we do a horrible job with that.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
We believe that we have to hold things, or some not hold things, right? Like sometimes we displace that responsibility, but we always have to work from that context of healing. Last week I was thinking about this because I had a rough week last week, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to function from a place of healing. And so how have I done that this week? How have I allowed myself to heal? What space have I given myself that is healing for myself? And we have to do that. We have to do that. So not only can we do that we have to do that for ourselves, so that also we can do that for the individuals that we care about. Truly, right?
Yeah. So the one thing that like really came into my mind is that I think when it comes to healing process, a lot of people don't know how to heal. I think like growing up, when I think about all the opportunities to heal, especially when we talk about like going to see like a therapist, or that was deemed as like, oh, something has to be absolutely wrong, or you're crazy, or you're this. A lot of people feel as like that healing is just praying about it. Some people feel that healing is, you know, you just got to work harder and you got to continue and keep pushing on.
Yeah.
So I think like a lot of these narratives when it comes to healing, for a lot of people, and including myself, like I think now I'm starting to scratch the surface of what healing is. Yeah. But a lot of people genuinely have never been taught, have never been seen, especially in the Black community.
Absolutely.
So like, what does healing actually look like?
Yeah. Again, man, that's such a loaded and layered question, because healing is going to look different for each individual, right? Part of your healing can be prayer, right? What are you doing regularly to live in a space where you're taking care of yourself, right? Sometimes that might mean like I'm making space to exercise. I'm being intentional to forgive myself for some things that, you know, I've been criticizing myself for in the past, right? I'm being intentional about that. I'm being intentional about really relinquishing the things that I've been holding tight to. Think about this. When we're internalizing things and holding things, then it's contained inward, right? We're trapping it in, right? Letting go and acceptance is part of the process of releasing some of that energy. And to release, we have to communicate. We have to talk about our needs. We can't expect for individuals to just know what we need. We have to learn how to communicate those things and communicate emotion. And so, like, I think it's recognizing what our particular issue is, how we're getting stuck. There's things that we're feeling constantly, right? And so for you may have been told, like, hey, you always are critical of yourself.
No, I get that.
I mean,
I get that all the time.
But where is that coming from? Where's the evidence of, like, of those self-blaming or even shaming tactics, and what's needed within that. I think there's a level in which we can start doing it for ourselves, but sometimes we do need to we need to seek help. Right?
Yeah. Can I ask you something about that? So when it comes to like being overcritical to yourself, right? And I think a lot of people have these aspects about them that might seem negative, but it also brings like some type of positive.
Say more about that.
So like essentially like if I know I'm overly critical about myself because I expect a lot. So like when I do something, I want to do something 100%. I want it to be great. I want it to be good. So being able to push myself to be overcritical helps me when I'm working on something to make sure I'm like really putting that energy and effort in. So it goes back to this idea of like functioning anxiety, right? It's a bad thing, but also there's these like positive results that comes from it.
Yeah.
So I know sometimes people don't want to like change those aspects because it's like I'm getting results.
Yeah, but I think that's the delusion, because why do we have to be critical in order to get the results? Why do we have to beat up ourselves? Why do we have to tear ourselves down to get results? Why can't we get the results from building ourselves up by motivating ourselves and telling ourselves that, oh, we're valuable and we're worthy to do well, right? When we take this negative aspect and say, oh, this is the thing that's going to give me the energy to succeed, like that is perpetuating an idea of what you already believe of yourself that can be very corrosive. That's like saying, oh man, I'm going to use the flu. I'm gonna get the flu so because I can be a better person if I got the flu. Well, I'm sick. How can I be better if I'm sick? And most of the time, when we work from that sick position, we just haven't really given ourselves the opportunity or the space to see how much more we can be when we are healthy, because we're so used to tearing ourselves down, and there may be a fear component in that. Like if I don't tear myself down, then I can't be great. You don't got to tear yourself down to be great. You can just be great. Yeah. And so I think that we have to get to a space where we can recognize like these tools, that we are using, in recognizing some of the harms that can be in that, right?
I think like for me, right, like one thing I really struggle with is this idea of like, it's hard for me to internalize me being great, because I think from my experiences, the other side of that is just like delusion or cockiness. And I think sometimes it's hard for me to be able to put myself out there and say like, yes, I do bring value, and yes, I am great, because in a way I've been taught that like when you speak highly of yourself in a lot of ways, that's a bad thing.
But that's the thing. It's a mismatch, right? It's like if you've assigned talking and building yourself up to cockiness, then you'll never build yourself up. That thing has been given meaning. And so we have to redefine, right? The meanings that we ascribe to these, to these things that we are believing, our beliefs, the meanings that we're given to these different narratives. Like I'm valuable because people have invested in me. I'm valuable because people believe in me. I am a change agent, right? Like, and I can be that, right? The other thing, you are the author, so you're writing the script. You can be great, but what does your great mean? You get to define that, right? And if we externalize that, then it's outside of ourselves. We can never grab hold to it because it's not even obtainable. It's too far away from us. And as we're moving, so is it, because we'll never be satisfied. That's what perfectionism is. It's the practice of never being satisfied, right? And so it is a process in recognizing how we're writing that script and how we're defining the script is really key. The meaning that we're assigning to these things. Why does me saying that I'm great and I have value, why is my confidence have to be something that I look at in a negative way? And usually it's the messages that we've received in our history that really assigns those things. And so we have to reframe, we have to relearn, right?
Yeah.
And we have to really break away from this internalizing bully mentality, self-bully mentality, because the world is the world can do that for us.
Yeah,
we don't
for
have
sure.
to do that to ourselves.
You know what's crazy? Like, as you were talking, I realized how much of a perfectionist I am. Because, like, while you were talking about, I do have value, and I'm a change agent. In my mind, the first initial thought was, like, well, what if other people don't see that? What if I go into a space and they don't see I'm valuable? Or if I lead with I'm being valuable and they don't see it the same way. And then, like, I went through, it's crazy, like, as you were talking, I went through this whole, like, cycle in my mind of, like, oh, man, I might not. I don't know. It just made me uncomfortable. I don't know if y'all saw it. Like, I kind of, like,
No, I hear you.
I got a little uncomfortable.
I hear you. But if we've placed, if we given the power to define that to external factors, then we never get to define it for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to define it. We have to say, oh no, I'm great, right? And I'm striving to be even better than that, right? We continue to strive in what is possible for ourselves as long as we live. We can write that narrative, right? And just because someone else don't think that we're great, I don't have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Why do I have to own what somebody else's expectations or beliefs are toward me? I don't have to own their expectations.
Yeah. I think it's hard just because, like, when you have, like, people-pleasing tendencies, you're so used to getting your value and you're getting your validation from other people that it's hard to navigate how do I get healthy validation? Because I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't care about what anybody thinks or you're not supposed to care. But I'd be lying if I said, like, I don't. Like, I care about what other people think. So I think sometimes I struggle with being able to navigate that, like, the people-pleasing tendencies, the perfectionist, and all these other elements kind of, like, mixed in together. That makes me, when I walk into the room not with that confidence, but almost that, like, I gotta prove myself.
Yeah, but that doesn't it doesn't seem like it lines up with the value, because if you please yourself, then you are pleasing others, right? Like if you're healed, then you are able to be healing for others. If you're living from a place of gratitude, then you're also able to give that to others. But if the expectation is that I have to get others to see it before I can believe it, then what if others don't ever believe it? And we're stuck in this conundrum that, just because I believe, I'm not going to give weight to me believing it. I need other people to do something or say something or validate me in order to believe it.
Yeah.
But most people will believe it when they can see it in you. And as long as you're trying to strive to fulfill whatever your internalized value is, then what more can you do? If we have this displaced ideology in terms of, like, our ability to know all the time what other people want of us, right? That's a delusion. We would never succeed. But if you know what you want of yourself and you strive to make that, there's areas in your life where you will see that happen. And I'm pretty sure you hear this from your friends all the time, right? Like, you can see the results. I think it was the time me and you were talking about, like, other people, complimenting us, and it's hard to receive that, right? I'm saying us because I've been in that role before too. But when we dismiss that, what we're doing is invalidating the other person's gift to us, and we do that because we've already invalidated it personally. It's easy to accept it when we've accepted internally. Like, you mean so much to so many people. I can accept that. I do. I believe that. And when you start believing it, you no longer have to be injured by those other beliefs and ideologies that's just harmful. Like those scripts that we tend to build and write within our narrative, that's just not based on any evidence of fact. We get to be. And when we start being that and living in that space and accepting those things, right, we release ourselves from this imprisonment of harm. And that can be a powerful and healing and so rejuvenating space, man.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be perfect all the time, right? Like, that's not even the goal, right? We'll have our good and bad days, but we're, can we speak to the majority of how we're showing up internally, and can that be represented in more times than not?
So going back to this idea of like accepting compliments, how do you like actually fully receive it? Because I definitely understand that part of like invalidating other people, but I think sometimes like in the moment you don't recognize that you're actually invalidating or minimizing what they're saying.
Yeah.
So like what are like how would somebody be like, yes?
Yeah, that would be a question I would ask. So if this was therapy, it's not therapy, right? But if I was in a session, that's something I would ask a client. Like, well, how do you accept it? How do you want to? How do you prefer to? Right? Or are you just would you rather reject it? And what does rejecting it mean for you? Is it the fear that's keeping you from accepting? And what is that fear? What's underneath there? Why does that have to be part of your process? What are you gaining? What's the benefits of doing it that way? Rather than just saying like, okay, this person validates me. I'm glad I could show up like that because that was my intent. I appreciate that. So it's more to the person. That's a question for an individual who is sitting in that space and continuing to really reject those things. Like, what is it about that you feel it's necessary to reject it? What's holding you back? You know, what's keeping you from receiving that? What is the story or the narrative that you're telling yourself that you don't deserve that?
And I think like what's so interesting about that too, like the more you ask those questions, I'm plugging in different words like love, trust, friendship. And it's crazy because the more I think about it, it's like, what is holding me back from accepting like genuine friendship and genuine love and all these other things that I think I've spent a lot of time trying to push away, even though people have definitely shown, and there's absolute facts and examples of people wanting to be there.
Yeah.
Why am I rejecting it? Why do I keep pushing it away? And
gotta answer that. You gotta answer that question, brother.
Yeah,
you gotta answer that question. And we all gotta answer that question, right? Like it's not a one-time thing, right? Why did I do it in this situation and I couldn't do it in this situation? We have to answer those questions for ourselves. If we want to be true to who we believe we are, right? Or who we desire to be, we have to answer those questions, right? And constantly answer those questions.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how often? Like
all the time. I mean, I don't know if it stops.
Yeah.
And then we have to question, well, why? Why does it have to be this way? Why do I have to see it this way versus this way? You know, what's hindering my belief that what this person is saying to me and giving me this gift that they're giving me is not true?
Yeah.
And how do I tell them that they're a liar? Like, you're lying about what you're saying about me. It changes. It changes how it feels, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe you. I doubt what you are feeling right now. How do we have the authority or the power to tell somebody else how they feel or what we meant to them? And what gives us the energy? What provokes us to do that? What are we dealing with internally that wants to reject that? Why do we feel that we're not worthy?
I think a lot of times it comes back to like a mistrust, and I think a lot of people struggle with. I say a lot of people lie, and I'm talking about myself.
Yeah.
But like for me, it's being able to recognize like, is this a healthy and genuine and actual, authentic, or are you just saying that because you have some type of ulterior motive? And I think figuring out how to recognize the difference between both of those is sometimes overwhelming in those moments. So rather than receiving, whether it's friendship, love, it's easier to deflect or to minimize it, to take a step back. And I think for myself, I just don't do a great job of, once I step back, I resort back in my thought process of the past and of those pain points. And then I have this mistrust that even if I do care about you and even if I do like you, there might be there's something here that's going to reaffirm the fear or the pain that I had in those situations.
And if we tell ourselves that over and over again, we're going to believe it. That's what makes it so powerful. If that's the thing that we're always telling ourselves, of course we're going to believe it. If I told you every single day that same thing over and over again, at some point, and you receive it, because you receive that, and you receive it, why wouldn't you believe it? What arsenal do you have to combat it? And so it's asking ourselves those questions, and when we find ourselves in a position where we are being critical and internalizing that critical, what is the usefulness of this? What is the utility of my criticism right now? Yeah. What am I running from? What am I afraid of? Why can't this be true?
If I'm somebody who, right, like when I'm by myself, I guess I don't have the confidence, or maybe I just don't see things clearly. How does one ask yourself those questions and be able to trust yourself? Because I think, like, I can ask myself that, but if deep down in my core I don't trust myself, how do I even trust that the answers that come out are even coming from a healthy place?
You won't, but you have to work on whatever that thing is that's deep down. Like, so it's not a one answer thing. It is perpetual. There's layers to it, and so it's digging underneath those layers. It's doing the work. And so when you say, like, what, all the time until you get to the core, all the time till you make it a daily practice to accept and receive, all the time, just as much, because you're doing the other thing all the time. You're practicing that every single day. You're going to get good at it. And so how do we combat it? We practice the other thing. We reframe. We say, well, why? You know? And it's a daily thing. Just because you can't see it now and it feels awkward, it probably should be, because it's a foreign idea. If I've never given myself compliments, if I've never truly accepted, my love for self, if I've always doubted, if that's what I've been practicing, it would be irresponsible to believe that I can just all of a sudden be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to accept myself tomorrow. Here's the thing that I'm planning to do intentionally. This is what I'm setting up. Here's what I'm going to expose. Here's what I'm going to tell my friends to do. Man, y'all hear me talking critically, or y'all hear me saying something doubtful? Correct it. I think I've seen one of your friends do that before.
Yeah. Jamal does it.
Hold you accountable. Yeah.
Jamal does it. A lot of people do. That accountability.
Accountability. But so it's a joint effort.
Yeah.
I think last time you talked about help too. We have to accept help, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing that just as well for ourselves. And at some point, if we practice that, then we'll get good at it. We'll grow. Right? Yeah. And we'll begin to see the fruits of that labor happen.
So how would we do that for our friends, right? So, like, say if you do recognize that those signs, or you're, they're not receiving it, or they're pushing back, or they don't necessarily want to do the work, or they're not at a place to do the work. How do you kind of like encourage or help, or?
Nope. Because you're not going to force somebody to do the work that ain't ready to do the work. How do you do that? I mean, that's like asking the question, like, how do we control other people? We can't. But what we can do is tell our truths. Like, hey, man, I remember having this conversation. I guess I won't say the names. But I was having a conversation with a person who was very meaningful to me. And I said that, I'm really getting tired of you beating up on my friend every single day. And I cannot continue to allow you to do that. So when you do that, I'm going to confront you until you stop doing it. That took a different, like, who? I'm talking about you.
So you pointed it right back at him.
Yeah, I'm talking about you. You're beating up on my friend. You are my friend. Why you continue to do that, right? And really highlighting that I'm not playing about that. Like, I'm seriously. Why would I sit here and let you be harmful towards yourself, and I have a deep love and affection toward you, right? I mean, we can express when we see those things. We can communicate when we see those things. We can't change people's mind.
What would you say to those people like who, they want to lean on their friends and they want to ask for help, but at the same time, like they feel like they would be a burden to their friends, or their friends might not be able to help them in the ways that they want. Like, what would you say to that?
Ask the question: would this be a burden? Would I be a burden? Because how do you know unless we're talking about people who can read other people's mind? And I don't think I'm saying, like, I think that is it, literally, like, how will we know if we don't ask? Like, would it burden you if can I just vent right now to you? Would it burden you and I need for you to be honest with me, because sometimes it may be a burden, and I'm going to trust that you can communicate for yourself when it is a burden, when it's not, when you do have the capacity and when you don't. And we need to do that for ourselves too. Like showing up for individuals. We cannot show up for individuals 100% of the time, no matter how much we want to. We got to be honest about that. Like, I don't have the capacity today, and it would do you a disservice to sit here and vent and open up, because I would not be able to provide you with the space that you need. I'm very distracted. I wouldn't want that for you. Here's when I can do that. And so I think that we have to ask the question: do you have space? Can you just listen? Can you provide me with this? And that's a good starting point to communicate and build that type of trust. Connection.
Whew, that's so much harder said than done in my mind.
Oh, it is until you do. Like, if you think of, like, so when I was doing my doctorates, oh my goodness,
good old PhD.
Listen, the trauma. Hey, so when I was doing my doctorates, man, I hated writing, but I wasn't sitting down and doing it. I just used to just hate it, but I wasn't doing it. Right? I had no relationship with it. In the relationship I did have, it was distorted in my thoughts of how it would be when I sat down and did it. And so I was having a conversation with my committee chair, one of them, and she said, well, are you sitting down and talking about this? Or, like, are you sitting down and actually writing? I was like, no. She said, 30 minutes a day. Just sit down and start. 30 minutes turned into an hour. An hour turned into 2 hours. I started to build a relationship with it. And until we do it, we can't really say how it's going to be. We have to take action. So
I think the major takeaway I'm taking from this, especially, is like how we have to start building more of a relationship, not only with ourselves, but with healing,
absolutely,
with doing the work, with like really, really holding ourselves accountable. In order to like catch ourselves in those moments when we're minimized and we're not giving ourselves the credit we deserve, or we're not receiving those compliments.
Absolutely.
Because I think, like, to your point, when you say building a relationship, it's not this overnight process.
No.
And I think sometimes I get lost in, oh, I know better. Why am I not doing better yet? Why do I have to keep checking in? Why isn't this already kind of like perfected and made and great to this point that I have to keep continuously working on it? And it takes building that relationship for sure.
Yeah, doing it and taking those steps.
So if you could leave people with like one piece of advice with being able to do that work or work on healing, what would you leave people with, or what would you tell them?
I think it's just, I think the thing that I would really want individuals to start thinking of doing is actually one day, just that one thing, identifying the one thing that you're going to do for yourself, and just do it. Just identify the thing and do it. Yeah, I'm just going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to encourage myself. And let that build upon itself. Don't have an expectation, right? It's not about what we feel oftentimes. It's about being repetitive. And so I would just encourage individuals to really, internalize that and speak that to themselves, right? Because until we do, we're always going to be creating the idea of what exists. And that becomes our reality.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you.
Absolutely,
thank
man.
you,
I feel like we need like a part 2,
definitely.
3, 4.
Oh, no, for sure.
It's so much to talk about.
Yeah, now I'm definitely going to have you back. And again, like, the main purpose of this is really just to have these real, authentic conversations.
Absolutely.
Because I think, especially when it comes to the Black community,
Yeah.
conversations about mental health, healing,
Absolutely,
doing the work, how we actually feel deep down in the core. I think we don't get at that enough. So yeah, I'm definitely tapped in with you for life.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So we'll definitely have you back.
I appreciate you having me, man, and this is really good. I hope people benefit from it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you everybody for watching. Catch y'all on the next time. Peace and love.